Mark, we were talking about Abraham Lucas, kid out of Washington State, and just I think I saw you talking to him when you were out here last year during the preseason. But, I just what you saw from him, because we were talking about, him possibly returning and then, maybe what we can expect from him. But I don't know if you looked at much of his film, but he sure did have a good rookie year when he was healthy.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I always thought, just watching him, the kid was a student, like understood angles, understood where his help was coming from. You always look at things like sets and how a guy uses his help, how a guy uses body presence, things of that nature that, are really just really keen awareness and understanding of the game. And you have to have that when you play this position. And so when I watched him, I thought technician-wise, I thought he was really good as a rookie, and was really excited about him as a player. And so anyhow, I had talked to him just because I thought I wanted to pick his brain and talk to him about just playing the position and how well I thought he did in his rookie year. And so he was one of those guys that you watch on film that you're like, okay, yeah, he gets it. He understands what he's looking at. He understands, like I said, where the help is coming from. One of the big things that I always thought of as a player is, like, any given play, where can I not get beat? Like, where do I not have help? And you kind of almost play the game that way. Like, where's my help coming from? But most importantly, where can I really get myself into trouble? And then we set accordingly. We make sure that we take those things away. We make sure that, like, for me, I always want to funnel a guy where I want that guy to go and invite him to go places where I know he'll get shut off by a running back coming through a gap, or whatever the case may be. So, little things, little nuanced things that I think the average person just doesn't even see. And a lot of, frankly, we are this, like Ray will tell you, we're this secret mushroom society. Like, nobody really knows what we're doing except us. Like, even the head coach doesn't know what the hell we're doing. So, like, there's a special bond, a special kinship between guys who play the position. And when you watch guys who play it well, and when you watch guys who really, you can see it on film when a guy really understands the nuance of the game. And that's the difference between being good and being great at that position, is the nuance stuff. And I thought he played with that nuance as a rookie. So it just was one of those things. I liked his intelligence, the way he played the game.
Hey, Mark, around the league and just, in all of football, I see it in some of the high school stuff that I attend out here in Seattle. You see it in college and now in the NFL. This idea that the interior offensive lineman, the guard and the center, has kind of been under or devalued, I guess, in a way, and it's also underdeveloped. If you were running a team or if you were the coach, how would you go about approaching that position? Because that seems to be one of the issues here, like throughout the years. Like, it's trying to find, since Walter Jones and that crew left, we just haven't quite recaptured the center and the guard spots. So, like, what would your approach to that be?
Yeah, I think one, obviously, it's tougher than people think. You're in there and you're kind of boxed in. You're playing in somewhat of a phone booth to a degree, and so people don't give it the credit that it deserves on how difficult it is. But I think one of the big things in today's game is you've got to be able to and when I work with teams, I always talk about taking the passive out of pass protection, and how many different ways can I attack the line of scrimmage as a player. And so, Ray, I was a big short set or up kick guy, and I did it my whole career. And I did it, I would up kick a guy in a 5-step drop that had multiple hitches. That's the way I operated. And in today's game, with the short passing game, in today's game with the quick throws, a lot of 5-step. There's not many 7 steps in today's game unless you're running play pass stuff. So there's not a whole lot of 7-step drops. That is basically taken out of game plans in today's NFL. So it's imperative that those guys are able to attack the line of scrimmage, or be able to short set people, and to be good at that stuff. So my big thing is, how aggressive can you be? And the other thing that has been lost to a degree is your ability to strike guys, your ability to punch guys. There's so much more catching that goes on, and there's not a lot of striking. And that becomes a really big thing, especially with all the pick stunts, the walk-up stuff, the linebackers, and how they operate inside. So all that stuff to me becomes, very nuanced and very important when it comes to protecting that inside between center guard. So anyhow, that's kind of what I would look for is guys that have aggressive sets and guys that can really strike people as opposed to catching people.
When you look at the offensive line for the Seahawks, and they've had their struggles all the way across the board, whether it's pass protection or the run block, and Charles Cross is having a pretty good year. But what do you see with the offensive line, and then what coming out of this bye week or in the bye week, what do you think the Seahawks should be looking to do with the offensive line here?
Yeah, well, it's hard because, I go back to some bye weeks that we had, like when I was playing, and we went back to, like, training camp practices. Mm-hmm. Like, stuff where it's strap on the pads and beat the snot out of one another and work on technique and work on some of the things that they get lost. And I think over time, a lot of that stuff gets lost because you get out of pads all the time and you get out of kind of working on that kind of full speed or full pad technique stuff. So those are always things that I look at. I just think bottom line is, and I say this all the time, it's the most skilled position on a football field. And, you think about it, and I tell this to people all the time, is that we're collectively the worst athletes on the football field. And every time we match up against another guy that we play against, that guy is a better athlete than us. And yet we're expected to win 100% of the battles. I can kick your ass for 66 plays in a row. If I give up one sack, I'm a piece of garbage and you go to the Pro Bowl. And there's no other position in the world in any sport that matches up a lesser athlete against a better athlete, and the lesser athlete is expected to win 100% of the battles. It's the only position. It's the only position in it. Like, hey, man, if you get caught in a switch in basketball and a little point guard blows by a center, we don't say, hey, dump that center, he's off.
Right.
We say, hey, man, that's a great, it's a great switch up. If a welterweight boxer goes in and boxes a heavyweight, we don't like shame the guy for getting beat, right? He gives up 80 pounds. And it's incredible because that's where the nuance and the understanding and the technique and the skill. Like, there's no greater skill in the world than moving, a man that's the same size and strength, moving a man from point A to point B against his will, who's the same size and strength. That's technique. It's 100% technique. And in today's game, and this is, it's funny that Roger Goodell, I was calling a game in Detroit a year ago, and last year, I think we lost 67 starting quarterback. Like, at one point or another, 67 games lost from the starting quarterback position. And Roger Goodell comes up to me and goes, Mark, what are we gonna do? Quarterbacks are dropping like flies. They're like, what are we gonna do? I said, hey, Roger, maybe we should practice. maybe the guys that you pay up front to protect the guy, maybe we need to practice. Like, maybe the position is really hard, and you've taken football, you've taken contact out of a contact sport. You've taken football out of football, and that technique stuff and that technique work is so valuable and so important, and you really can't simulate it in a patty cake drill. It just doesn't work that way, and so. It's the law of unintended consequences, right? We're gonna protect our players, and we're gonna get healthier, and we're not gonna beat them up. And ultimately, I think more injuries happen because of the way we practice, because of the way we've tried to eliminate injuries. And I say this to Dave all the time, and I get myself in trouble sometimes, but for the people who complain about our game and the people who don't like our game, screw them. It's not for everybody. It's why not everybody can play it. Frankly, not everybody's tough enough to play it. Not everybody has balls enough to play it. It's a brutal sport, and there's some of us that can do it, and there's some of us can't. And you know what? I love that aspect of our game. And so I don't want to change anything. I want it to be to have a certain gladiator nature to it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I heard from Ron Wolfley, who does color for the radio. It's like, not everybody will do it.
Right.
I mean, it's like you have to willingly agree to go into a car crash, basically. So,
right.
Yeah, and that's kind of what separates, from other athletes, I think, football players. But, Mark, you look around the league right now. Last night I was watching a replay of the Steeler game, and I don't know if you've seen this kid, Alex Highsmith. I mean, he's opposite T.J. Watt, so nobody really pays attention to him. But I was just looking at the way their defense is put together. They got Russ there now. They got a two-headed monster at, the running back, and with Harris and I'm trying to remember the other kid's name. But, and they've got good receivers on the outside. I mean, I think it's Warren. Yeah. I mean, that's the team I think looks the best right now. But what about you? When you look around the NFL, who's the hot team right now?
Yeah, Pittsburgh's playing really well. There's no questioning how well they're playing. Philadelphia is a super talented team. Now their coach makes some really boneheaded decisions at times. Especially you get 16-0 and you decide to go for two. I don't know about you guys, but 16-0 is a 2-score game. 17-0 is a 3-score game. Like I'm not a great guy when it comes to math and stuff, but you're like, what are you doing, you idiot? But I think Philadelphia's incredibly talented. I'm really looking forward to watching them play Washington tonight because I think it's a good game. And Washington's done some amazing things early this season, and their quarterback is playing really well. But yeah, I really like Pittsburgh. I love Baltimore's offense. Baltimore's offense is just they bludgeon you. They've got a 315-pound fullback and Patrick Ricard. Defensively, they struggle a little bit though, so that'll be interesting. I tell you, it was interesting watching Denver play Kansas City. Kansas City's the only 9-0 team, only undefeated team. But they gave them fits, and they gave Patrick Mahomes fits. I mean, they brought pressure on almost every pass rush, and it wasn't, not a blitz, but a dog, a 5-man pressure almost on every single one. They played a bunch of man, bringing an extra rusher, so it was always a 5-guy rush, and they sped Patrick Mahomes up. I mean, he got to the point where there were a couple of reads where he got off him quickly because he was so sped up, and those guys came wide open, could have thrown touchdowns. They did a really good job. And, again, I don't know that that's a blueprint. I mean, everybody will look at it and go, wow, they really did a good job. But you got to have people that can, on the back end, that can go man-to-man with you. So, that's something there. Detroit is even – like you throw 5 picks in a game and you pitch a shutout in the second half and you find a way to win that game. Detroit to me, is the best team in the NFL, and they're incredibly talented, but they're super physical. Like they're a super physical team. So it'll be interesting to see, if they can get a pass rush. Aiden Hutchinson's down. Who they trade for? I can't remember who they traded, but they traded for an edge guy. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But he hasn't played.
Oh, Zadarius Smith.
Zadarius Smith, yeah, Zadarius Smith. So we'll see what he brings to the table. He didn't play yet, so it'll be interesting. But Detroit to me is probably the best team I've watched.
Hey, Mark, we were just talking about Shane Waldron, and kind of Ray and I we coached high school together, and so we were kind of swapping stories. And then this story came up, and I think it was Keenan Allen that called Shane Waldron too nice. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think to a lot of people that might sound silly, but there's something to it, right? I mean, you have to have a little bit of, I don't know, we were using the word conviction. Maybe he's not passionate enough or whatever. And I don't know if you've done a couple of his games, and it'll be his third stint if he gets hired somewhere, or maybe even more than that. But as far as coaching goes, you ever have a coach like that that's too nice, or what were some of the coaching styles that you experienced when you were in the NFL?
I've never had a coach that was too nice. The coaches I played, man, I gave up a holding call in a game against Houston. You and I were on the same team in Denver. And Coach Alex Gibbs met me on the numbers, on the field, on the numbers at the 30. We walked to the sideline and all the way back down to the other 30. And I sat down on the bench, and he was like, you mother, blanking, C, blanking, all the way down, just on me. And he was screaming at the top of his lungs, calling me every name you could possibly call a guy. So I plopped down on the bench, and he goes, hey, okay, let me ask you a question. And so now I think we're going to do some coaching, right? Like what happened, how'd you get a hold, right? So I'm like, yeah, what? And he goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, do you got money on the other team? And then he went back into a whole nother, you mother, and like, seriously, just dog cussed me though. There was never any like, hey, you got to take this set or you got to do this or whatever. He just mother effed me all the way down. I mean, that's how I got coached my whole life. So I don't know about being too nice, but I think one of the things that bothers me about Chicago is, like, I've always felt like this, and all the teams that I was involved in, like, it was never the coach's team. Right. It's our team. Like, I mean, I was like, nobody comes around, nobody buys a ticket to go watch Mike Shanahan coach his ass off on the sideline. They come to watch us play. That's what they buy tickets for. It's our team. And if the guy's too nice and guys are slacking and guys aren't practicing hard, and these were all the complaints coming out of Chicago, guys aren't practicing hard, guys aren't paying attention to details, guys aren't – like, where are the guys on your team that have onions enough to say, this ain't good enough, you guys? Like, this ain't going to win jack. Like, where are those guys? And, and if head coach is allowing that stuff to happen, it's, the old saying is you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. Like, where are the people that stand up within the organization? Like, that makes no sense to me. So, we can pass the buck. You can sit there and say, hey, man, we got a problem here. And, our locker room is full of trash, and it's a really problem. It's a real problem. Like, nobody's putting their ankle tape in the garbage cans. And this place is a pigsty. I can point out the problem, but if nobody's actionable, if nobody picks up, if nobody actually addresses the issue, well, all we do is we see a problem, but we don't have enough leadership in our locker room. We don't have enough professionals in our locker room to say this practice is not good enough. Like, shame on the players in Chicago for being able to point the finger. I mean, the old saying is I need some thumb pullers, right? Finger pointers I don't need. I need some guys that'll say, hey, man, I'm going to take it on myself. And you just don't have the right guys in their locker room, I suppose.
Hey, Mike. Mark. When you talk about that type of thing, like having like that voice in the locker room, when I look at the Seattle Seahawks offensive line room, there's some good players in there. There's some good dudes, but they're all more like quiet type of guys. And I've always been in offensive line rooms where there's at least one dude that is like what you're talking about. They're going to call you for your stuff. So like when I was here in Seattle, like my big deal was like I would false start a little too much. And I remember Ray Donaldson came here, and Ray was old enough to have played with the Baltimore Colts. And I false started a couple times in the game, and he just came to me and like almost like a dad, put his finger in my face and said, no more, big fella. And I just said, yes, sir. Like I didn't even I didn't challenge him or anything. And then when I played in Detroit, we had Kevin Glover, who was kind of a guy like that. Do you think that, obviously you can't use that every time that there's something not working, but do you think that for an offensive line room like Seattle's, do you think a veteran voice like that will work or could be effective, or does it have to be someone that is playing well that have to say it? If everyone's not playing well, it's kind of hard to say something. Like how do you think that dynamic could play out in a room like that?
Yeah, I always think it's important to have guys who have been there, who have done it, even if they're not the starters anymore. Guys who have had success and guys that can kind of lead you in that, give you an example. And then, just guys that are professionals. Like I always tell people, man, listen, I might not have been the best, but I was a professional freaking football player. That's what I did. And from a study standpoint, like I might have gotten beat physically every now and again, but I did not make mistakes. I did not have mental errors ever. I mean, I never busted a play. I just didn't bust plays. And it wasn't because I was smarter than everybody else. It's because I was a professional freaking football player. And so that stuff is in your control. Like you like, I remember a young player that was unbelievably talented that we drafted in like the 3rd round. And the kid had all kinds of talent. But that dude made more mental errors. And I remember going up to his room in training camp back when we used to go out to Carlisle. Not Carlisle, excuse me. This was in Denver, so we used to go to Greeley. Yeah. And up in Greeley, and I went and knocked on his door between practices. And, no answer. And finally he comes out. He's rubbing the sleep out of his eyes because he's taking a nap. And I said, I need to tell you something, man. I go, the coaches right now look at you as a kid who has a lot of talent. I go, if you keep busting 6 plays of practice, they're going to look at you as a kid who had a lot of talent. I said, do you understand the difference between have a lot of talent and had a lot of talent? Had is past tense. It means they're going to cut your ass because you're too stupid to put your nose in the book. Instead of sleeping through this, you should be studying so you don't continue to screw this thing up. And, I love the kid enough to give it to him straight. Like, you're an idiot if you can't pick this stuff up, right? And if you can't pick it up, then instead of sleeping through the afternoon, I'll sit, because I don't take a nap. I'll sit there and study with you. I'll sit there and help you. But you cannot continue to bust plays on a consistent basis because they're going to cut you. And you're too damn talented to continue to play this way. And, and just things like that where you have to have players on your football team that are willing to be honest, and want to have the best for those guys. Yeah, I want the best for young players. I always felt like it was my responsibility to teach them everything I knew. And then also I was arrogant enough to believe even if I taught you everything I knew, you're still not better than me. So it's not like I'm going to lose my job. But I wanted our team to be as good as it could be.
Well, Mark, that's Mark Schlereth. You've heard on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. Really appreciate the time, brother. And good chat, man. We'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Have a good one,
Yeah,
brother.
We'll talk to you next week.